Here we go. Thank you everyone for your patience, because this interview should have been 2 days and 2 hours ago, where I was holidaying with my boys in very poor internet connection. So thank you, first of all, Chris, for your flexibility to let me move this interview, and thank you everybody for your patience, because I understand quickly before I introduce Chris that today is a very deep and very hot topic in our group, and also around and outside of our group. This is a really deep conversation for Chris and I as well. This is, highly emotional, and even more so important that we bring this to the table. But before I go further into this, I want to introduce the beautiful Chris Krupar. Chris has been quite a regular now in our group for quite some time, and it's the only person who ever came to a second and now third interview with me, apart from Emily May, where we had our ongoing series. But in Upscroll Grief, you're the first person who made it to a third interview for very particular reasons that we get to in a moment. So Chris, I feel extremely blessed, not just that our life paths have crossed, but also that you are in my group, that you are a huge supporter of the group, of the healing part in our group. And that most recently, you've also joined our mod squad. You've become one of our moderators in the group, which makes you the first male moderator in this group. So woohoo! That was very exciting for all of us. So would you like to say a few words?
And I got quite the initiation.
Yeah, please share. It was quite funny because I actually said to Chris, hey, we will not bombard you with any messages in the mod squad. We've got a little chat group in a mod squad where we talk about things behind the scenes, how we can support the group better if things are coming up in a group that we all want more attention on. And Chris came into the group and the messages were going wild and everybody was super excited. And I'm like, oh, so much for not a lot of messages, but it was a beautiful welcome. So yeah, is there anything that you would like to say quickly to those in the group that are new, that have never seen you before? Maybe you can introduce yourself quickly, because I know most of you know you by now, but maybe for the new people in the group.
So yeah, my name is Chris Krupar. I am in New Mexico in the United States. And it was a blessing that Marie and I crossed paths in that we had similar names to our websites, and in a search I popped up and we connected and realized that we shared absolutely the same passion when it comes to helping people heal after they've suffered loss. And so I had a 24-year-old son that passed away 5.5 years ago. And like most people, I absolutely went through my stages of grief, as you might say, but I made some conscious decisions early on, early enough that I actually went back to work full-time 3 days after my son's memorial service. And I did that because I just wanted to take those particular steps towards, being back to normal. And that first day back, somebody approached me and they were crying. At first I thought they were crying just to share in my sorrow, but they shared with me that they were missing a son. Their son had disappeared, and that he suffered from drug addiction, and that she feared the worst. And it was just in that moment that I realized, here I am navigating through this. She may have to navigate through this. And as I go through this, I really need to take notes. I really need to be aware. I had already decided to go through it completely eyes wide open. I made the choice not to take any medications or seek professional help, but I encourage people to do that if need be. And since then, from then until now, it's just all been about, taking those notes, leaving those breadcrumbs. It's now all about helping other people navigate through, their particular loss.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that, Chris. And I actually want to pick up on something that you just said. You personally made this choice, and this is something that Chris and I talk about in our quick pre-chat about this interview that we're doing today, that it is very important for us, for both of us, to have the disclaimer in around this whole interview, really, that everything that we will be discussing here today is coming from a place of love and coming from an intention to give you different perspectives towards healing. This is with no disrespect to anybody's situation. We totally appreciate that everybody's situation is very unique and very different. We want to say that with a whole lot of love and respect in our hearts for all of you. So it was very important for us. We actually had 2 chats about this interview because it is so highly touchy-feely, this topic, but it is so important for us to pick it up and talk in front of all of you about this topic because it is so deep and so important. So everything that we share is coming from a place of love, and everything that we share is coming with the intention for you to look at a different perspective in terms of healing. And with that being said, one thing that we really want to pick up on today is this social construct that is built around, in particular, the topic of child loss, in general around loss, but today we really want to focus on that very particular topic of child loss that comes with a particular stigma, with a social construct. And Chris, I'm going to put you on a spot with this because you have put this together so beautifully to talk about this social construct and the expectations that comes with it. Would you like to repeat that here for our audience? And before you do, I just want to say hi to Terry and Heather and a couple of other people watching here. I can't see all of your names, but Terry in particular said hi. Hi, they're wonderful people. Hi, they're beautiful. Terry, we're so happy for you to watch, and Heather, of course, and a few others that I can't see the names of. So I will be checking back to your comments because it's really, really important for both of us. But if there are comments or questions that we can pick them up here in the interview. So back to you, Chris. You know, I'd really love your take on that social construct, please.
So, you know, all the experiences that we have in life, and we can term some good, some bad, some happy, some sad, as experiences happen to us in life, you know, we have responses to those experiences, and there's a lot of reasons why we respond the way that we do, and we could talk about this for hours, really. There are psychosomatic responses, physiological responses. There's the emotional element, and then there's, you know, the social influences, or I like to use the term social construct. You know, social constructs are those beliefs that are shared by many people, and one of the greatest examples, which I like, I think it's kind of funny, is that the value of money is a social construct. When we think about money, you know, a dollar or whatever your particular currency is, it's a piece of paper. It has somebody's picture on it. It has some numbers that indicate its value, but we all have to believe and agree that that piece of paper is worth what it's worth. And folks will say, but, you know, most currency is backed by gold. That's where I have to chuckle a little more and think about, well, what makes gold worth what it's worth? It's shiny. It's a great, it conducts electricity very well. But beyond that, I like to think of it this way. If you were stranded on a deserted island and you had to choose between a bottle of water and a bar of gold, most people would take the bottle of water. But we put a value on a thing because as a whole, as a society, enough of us agree that gold or money is worth what it's worth, simply because we have all subscribed to the idea or notion of that thing. And that's a social construct. And so social constructs are part of many of the aspects of our lives, faith and belief systems, how we process things, you know, our political opinions, all those things are in essence a social construct. And so that's one of the most significant effects on why we react to, respond to, and how we navigate through many of the events and occurrences in our lives. And the loss of a loved one is just one of those events, and the loss of a child is getting more specific. And the loss of a child has its own sort of social construct and social influences, social opinions, expectations. You know, it's looked at differently, and there are reasons why, you know, it is looked at differently. I know that when my son passed, as I began to interact with other folks, at first I didn't want to interact with anybody, but once I started to interact and listen to people, I heard a lot of the same things repeated. And the number one term that I heard people say was that no parent should ever bury their child.
Yeah.
And that if I heard it once, I heard it 100 times.
Of course.
But I sat for a moment thinking about that. No parent should ever bury a child, but yet many of us do every single day. We certainly don't want that to happen. We certainly hope that doesn't happen, but it does.
It does,
and that phrasing and that statement so convincing that it should never happen, right? That no parent should ever have to bury their child. That's part of that social construct. That's woven into the fabric of why and how we process such a thing.
Yeah.
So.
I also want to say to that, I can only highlight how much that is of the social construct, because, or how much that's really written as a law, almost, this sentence that you just said, no parent should ever bury a child. And only when you have the courage, I have to say, because there is really that risk that people like literally bombard you and want to just shred you to bits. I'm saying it's as brutal as it is when you dare to say that. But when you dare to question that and look behind it and go like, okay, but says who? Who writes this law? But society, but history. Yes, there is this natural order that usually parents pass before us, but there's also like, no wife should ever bury her husband at the age of 45. No wife should ever bury her husband at the age of 26. There are, so many widows groups now where I see people younger and younger, and then in many groups it becomes this competition: who has lost more people, who has had a more tragic loss, who has lost a child at a younger or older age. And then it becomes this, well, at least you didn't have that attachment yet because the child was in your womb, or at least you had 30 years with him because, and I'm like, who makes up these rules? Grief is not a competition. Grief is really something where I feel we all need not just a space to heal, but to be allowed to heal. And this is the very reason. Hello, dog. I love that your dog just came into the interview.
we're having a bit of a windstorm. Doesn't like the wind. So.
I love it. Usually it's always my dog or cat coming in. But I want to go back to this: who makes the rules? And when I first started Loving Life After Loss, I mentioned that many times in various interviews where I was interviewed, or when I chatted to other people that I interviewed, that one of my biggest fears was that somebody would come to me and go like, who are you to tell me you have never lost a child? That was really one of my biggest fears. And only through ignoring the fear and really just sitting in love, and not coming from a space of fear, but coming from a space of love and going like, why am I here? What am I doing with this? And what is my purpose with this group? And my purpose with this group is written all over it. It's the name of the group. It's the getting people to the space of loving life after loss. That is my sole purpose, why I started this. And then with people through Terry, who's watching here right now, with you, Chris, who I've got the pleasure of talking to, and also Bonnie Schwartz, who has just joined. Hi, Bonnie. I'm so glad that you're here. With people like you, I have learned that you can make a difference. You can make a difference to the statement of nobody should ever, or there's nothing worse than burying your own child. And this is a statement that we can take as a given and put it on as a label. And again, I'm saying that with so much love and respect for where you are. Or you can allow yourself to look at, what would the other option be? What is my other option? What if I allow myself to heal through this? not only am I absolutely convinced without knowing all of you in person or any of your details to your story that your child would want that for you. That's one of my biggest beliefs. Yet I also believe that we are here to be happy. We are here to love life and to create and find our purpose, what we are here to do. And Chris, when I met you, I was absolutely blown away how you really wholeheartedly made that decision of loving life after. That's the name of your website, you know, so close to mine. And I just couldn't believe it. You find somebody who's so aligned, not just with naming what we do, but with how we live our life and how we really live our decision to loving life. And yeah, I want to give this back to you now, the microphone, because this is just really, I was one of those people who believed that expectation, there's nothing worse than that, than child loss. And meanwhile, I do not believe that anymore. And I'm saying that with a lot of respect because it hasn't happened to me, but I know it has happened to you and to a couple of people watching here that have also made the decision to heal through that and to love life. So give us a bit of a perspective from your end. What did it take and what does it take to make such a decision and to ignore a label that is so strong and so heavy, really?
Yeah, one of the other experiences I had earlier on was that probably within 6 months of my son's passing, a friend of mine lost her father, and they were very close, very close, very strong bond. And she had reached out and was talking to me, and in the course of the conversation, she stopped herself and said, "I don't even know why I'm saying any of these things to you. How could I possibly, be sad when I'm talking to someone who lost a child?" And she said, that's just the worst thing. This should be easier for me. And she began to make that comparison. And, I just shared with her, I'm like, loss is loss. It has its difficulties, and it takes, the effort to decide to navigate through it. And it doesn't serve us any purpose to set particular losses at higher or lower values or, higher or lower levels of impact. It's just that we've heard so often, and and it isn't always just, it isn't all about the cliches, like no one should ever bury a child or, things of that nature. There are those other elements and aspects to, what affects us. And a lot of it is, some of it is, we are very accustomed to patterns. And when we spend every single day with an individual, and today they're here, tomorrow they're not, there's that disruption. And that creates in and of itself a reaction. But that somebody being here for a certain period of time and then tomorrow they're not here is only relative as to whether that was a son or a husband or a daughter. Again, that goes back to, and for us to consider, why. Emotions are part of who we are. We are a whole being. We are emotions. We are logic. We're spirit. We're many things, and emotions are a good thing. One thing I would never do is tell somebody, well, you shouldn't be sad. But the key is, and what I took the time to really slow things down and to not just work the emotional side of my brain, but to let the logic side to come in, was to understand why. It's always okay to feel a certain way. It's okay to feel very sad, but to understand why, that's the freedom. That's where you can find freedom, even in the deepest of grief, when you can get to the point to have that logical conversation with yourself to say, well, why do I feel this way? Here it is, and this is how I feel, and that's fine, but why? And for me, I was very fortunate And it could just be my personality makeup. I spent years in information technology. I was a programmer, so I'm very logical. I think in simple lines of computer code, and understanding, if this, then why that, and so forth and so on. But, for me, it was, I would have those moments where I would get caught up in the emotion of it. But when I can find that break and I'd stop for a minute and I think, well, why? What triggered that? Why did I feel that way? And I began to see patterns. I realized other people that had talked about their grief went through similar things. And that was something else that I did too, was I looked outwardly. I had other friends that had lost children and saw they were living their lives to the fullest, and before that event had happened to me, I might have looked at them and said, wow, how could you have recovered, and gone on. But, all of that becomes part of that self-assessment. And that's difficult when you are in the throes of the feelings of it. When you are in the throes of the
Absolutely.
emotions of it, it isn't easy to put the brakes on a little bit and then stop to try to think about it logically. But that's something that's very important, and again, it's the emotions are going to be there, but it's understanding why. Why do we feel that way? And when I broke it down, I realized, there, one of the things that, as you, whether you're studying psychology, or even if that crosses over into spirituality, or faith or religion, there's a lot of mention about human beings suffering because of attachment. We become attached to people. We become attached to the idea of a person. And so I realized that some of my earlier grief was really all about being attached to ideas. And I thought some of the typical thoughts that I'm not going to get this.
Hearing you now.
Can you hear me now?
In and out. Yeah, the internet doesn't seem to be very stable. I'm not sure if it's on your end or on mine. It shows me I've got full connection, but I'm not really sure. Your internet,
can you hear me now?
Is unstable. That's interesting.
Yeah, everything's working okay on my end.
Okay.
I hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you were cutting off before. Can Terry, Bonnie, can somebody of you tell me if you can hear Chris or myself? It's all good here. Okay, let's just keep going. That's fine. I don't want to interrupt anything that's working. Yeah. Chris, I would love to ask you something. When you said you've met a lot of folks that have lost children as well, and obviously just here in this very group, we have a lot of people. Okay, it's on my end. Everybody can hear you well. Great. And what I would like to know, because the very reason why we're sitting here together and talking about this now was one particular post that has stirred up a lot of conversations in this group, which I absolutely welcome. I'm always glad when things come up that that have got a lot of interest and really bring up a lot of conversations. And that was in particular about a post about child loss, where a lot of people came to the forefront then sharing their experience. And there were mostly people that have lost their children as well. And I have to say that the majority of the comments were rather on the resigning side, resigning themselves to the fact that this will never get better. There will always be a hole. This can't ever be mended, or my life is over. Comments along those lines, and some of them with a little bit of hope, some of them with none whatsoever. But only a few, like yours or Terry's, for example, were fostering the healing and putting the focus on the healing and actually opening the doors to the opportunity of healing. And this is the very fact why we said, hey, let's talk about this. What is stopping people from allowing the healing in? And there is a lot of expectation from society, like with the labels, you should not ever bury your child, or nothing will ever make this better, or it's just there's just so many expectations of society that if you lose a child, nothing worse can ever happen to you. And none of us agree with that, not you and not I. And that's why we're sitting here talking about it, because we both know that there is another option, and that is called healing. And it is not the question, is it possible or not? It's just that fact, when you get to that level of asking yourself, how is it possible? That's where we want people to come to this level of, how can I heal from that? Because when you ask yourself how, then you open yourself up to the opportunity of it. When you sit in the space of, it is impossible to heal from that, then you are absolutely right. And that is, again, with a whole lot of love and respect, that is a mindset thing. You know, that very famous quote from Henry Ford: if you think you can or you think you can't, you're both right. And that is where I would like to start from. So when we do get to this space where we allow, what should we call it? The possibility, when we make room for the possibility that there is healing, that is when we can open the door to, okay, let's look at that. How can I actually do that? How can I heal from this? But we do need to take this very first step of saying, okay, if I make room for this possibility of healing, how can I make this happen? And this is where I want to give it back to you, Chris, because you are the one who has done it and who has experienced it. And there are a few people in this group who have experienced it, and they are on their path to healing, on their journey to healing. So when you are facing somebody who has lost a child and who can't see that possibility whatsoever, what would you like to say to them?
I think it's real important that maybe I should just break down where I'm at today. You know, as I sit here today, the typical things that we hear, that the loss of a child leaves a hole that can never be filled. It's a measure of grief that doesn't go away, but maybe just gets a little better over time. I mean, all those things. For me, as I sit here today, there is no hole. There's no emptiness. I live a wonderful and fulfilling life that I love. I won't even sit here and say that I do all that to honor my son, because I know he would want me to honor myself. You know, the best thing that any human being can do for the rest of the world is be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And that's what I work on every day. Do I miss my son? Yes, but if I had to compare it to something, I would say that maybe I miss him the way you would miss a child if they decided to live overseas, right? You know, that there are those times and moments that I think, oh, I know that Ryan would have loved doing this with me, but it doesn't really bring out sadness or sorrow anymore. I've allowed myself to give into what I believe is the truth about love and gratitude, you know, and I'm so grateful for the 24 years that we shared this path together, you know, and I played the role of the dad and he played the role of the son. And I have particular spiritual beliefs that, you know, we'll cross paths again. But even if that's not the case, you know, we shared an incredible part of our journey. And, you know, and I'm grateful for that. So I don't have any sorrow. Am I completely healed? I don't know how much more I could heal. Quite frankly, there are other aspects of my life now that I'm working on that have nothing to do with the loss of my son. You know, there are other things that I deal with as I try to be a better person and try to live, you know, a more happy and fulfilled life. And if my son is in a conscious form and he's, you know, reviewing my life, I know that that makes him happy, that I'm focusing on the things that I really need to focus on. So yeah, you know, for somebody who's lost a child, you know, you and I are not going to be the same. You're not going to follow exactly the same path that I did, but I can, you know, if you look at this as though you are starting off to climb Mount Everest, then I'm standing at the top of the mountain waving, saying it's possible. You know, if one person can climb Mount Everest, then so can someone else. They may
Yeah.
not do it the same way, but once somebody notices that someone else has navigated through a thing, conquered a thing, got to the other side of a thing, then there's that possibility that you talked about.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to at least believe it's possible. A thing that I focus on a lot when I try to help folks is, we live in a society that's really hung up on finish lines. People are trying to get to a finish line, trying to win the trophy. Somebody that's, for instance, wanting to climb Mount Everest. But I have a friend who recently took the trip over there just to hike up to the base camp. He at no time attempted to climb the mountain, but he just went to the base camp and hung out for a while. And that was great. And what I try to help folks to see is, crossing a finish line is great, but if you've just suffered a loss and you just started the navigation process, and if you're looking at me way over here that I've gotten to the other side of it, and you start to think about, well, I want to get there now or tomorrow. I'm glad that you are considering the possibility, but give yourself a mountain of credit if you'll just step across the starting line. The finish line's great, but give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself a trophy every day that you just take one step across the starting line. Famous football coach Don Shula is quoted as saying, "It is the start that stops most people." And a friend of mine that had lost his son a year or so before I lost mine, I went to meet with him, and he had looked at me and just determined that he was never going to step across that starting line. He said, I've come to the conclusion that I will never again have a good day. I'll just instead try to do something good in each day. And that was it. He was standing there on the other side of the starting line and told himself, I'm never going to step across it. And, that's what's so important, is that any kind of forward progress creates momentum. If you're just taking little baby steps, 3 days after my son's memorial service, I was sitting there the night before that third day. I looked at my wife and said, I'm going to just get up in the morning and put some work clothes on and go to work. I probably won't get much done. I'll probably stare at my computer for a while, but I'm going to take that step back towards normal. And, taking those little steps, and each time you do that, congratulating yourself and embracing that possibility that healing can continue, and that you can keep taking those steps. Marie, you and I both having suffered our loss, neither one of them any more difficult or easier than the other. But yet here we are, living a healed and whole and happy life, and loving our lives. And so there is that possibility. I know that when we are in that early stage, we've just lost someone, and we still feel that we're in that struggle with the grief, or maybe even feel like, the grief is winning. There's a lot going on. And I think, and Marie, I think you agree that when we lose someone, I think one of the first struggles when we even think about the possibility of being healed, that we wrestle with the guilt of that. That we don't want to that to get to the other side may mean, well, if I'm over it, did I really love that person enough? Did I love my child enough? How could I be healed? How could I be having fun?
How can it possibly be having fun when my child passed or when my husband passed? It's a huge topic for any sort of loss, the guilt. How can I possibly, and my understanding of that I have now, that I have learned and that I'm living and that I'm teaching, is how can you possibly not? Because you're the one alive, it's your right, and it's almost your duty, but it sounds too negative. But this is what life is there for, to be lived, to be loved. And literally, I know it sounds all airy-fairy, but we are both a living proof of this. That to me is what life is all about. To have fun, to live it. And it is a decision after all. I have to highlight that over and over again. It all starts with a decision. And as you said, Chris, your friend made a decision that he'll never have a good day in his life ever again. But it's a decision. And he can change that decision every single day to, you know what, from here on in, I decide that I want to have a good day. And it starts with one. It literally starts with one and then the next. And when I experienced the loss of Rob, I have shared this many moments, my moment in the kitchen where I started singing Love is in the Air, because it was a song that I sang all the time. You know, Rob and I were very much in love, and that song was sang a lot by me. And the very first time I started singing it, my voice just left me after the first few words. And I was, you know, going into this very conscious process of, what am I doing here? And why am I stopping? And why am I not? And why am I singing? And there were all these, wow, that was such an awkward moment for me. And in that very moment, I made the decision that I do want to keep singing. And it's very symbolic, you know, it's very symbolic, because I always sing when I'm happy. And I made a very conscious decision, I do want to keep singing. And I was saying my love is in the air, and it was definitely not with as much enthusiasm and, you know, like it used to be, but it was a start. It was one step in the right direction, and it was a decision I made there and then that I do want to keep singing. And I feel that for a lot of people, like Diane just said, I'm just looking down at the comments, making a conscious choice daily. That's exactly it, Diane. For that alone, I just already want to say congratulations, because that's exactly what it is all about.
Yes.
And that's what got me through the first few weeks, making a conscious choice daily to make this a freaking awesome life for my boys and myself, and not forgetting myself with that, because that's very important, you know, to think about yourself and not just do it for everybody else, because that often then makes you become an empty shell, like a really great mask where everybody thinks your life's going fine anyway, but inside you're fully crumbling, and we don't want that either. So you need to make sure that you're high up there on your priority list, and it does start with a decision.
The other thing too is, if I'm going to, be here and be transparent, I mean, yes, I would say I'm healed and I'm loving my life, but when I mentioned before that there's other parts of my life that I'm still working on, right? So I still have my struggles. I still have my negative days. I have days that I wake up and roll out of bed thinking, ugh, do I really have to, get up and go to work again, or do this or do that? So it's not that my life is perfect, and it's not that I'm happy 100% of the time, but my up and downs in life are not specifically tied to that one particular event of the passing of my son. My life's ups and downs are just tied to the everyday, occurrences and things that everyone else has to navigate through. So it might seem like I live some sort of, blissful life all the time, but I have good and bad days like everyone else. A couple things I wanted to touch on, because it's important. We talked about the social construct, talked about some of the statements that people make, common, statements and things. It is really important to keep in mind too, that as we think about the whole being that we are emotion, we are physical, we are logic, we are spirit, the physical aspect of it, we can underestimate. If you could Google and do a little research on the human brain, and all scientists agree that our emotional brain, our amygdala, which is the one that causes us to fall into deep emotional stress or deep emotional reactions, that part of your brain and your frontal lobe, your logic part of your brain, they have to give way to each other. They both can't operate at 100% at the same time. And so, when you are in that state, or those stages of grief where you feel like it's a battle or that it's winning, stopping for a moment and just allowing yourself to make decisions, those little ones, stepping over those starting lines. And like when I decided to go back to work, though I had no idea what that was going to play out like, I put myself in the car, right? All the time that you're thinking through and making choices and decisions, then you are giving the emotional part of your brain a rest. And that's good for us. It's good to find that balance. One of the posts that I saw out there, somebody was talking about what to do with the ashes of their lost loved one.
Yeah,
and
that
I
was
noticed
another
that
one with a lot of child loss comments. Yeah,
yes,
and ashes, of course,
and
absolutely.
and she was giving it a lot of thought. She was thinking about all the possibilities of what to do, and where you might focus on whether or not, or what level of attachment should we have to somebody's remains. I'm looking at that thinking that she's thinking about possibilities and choices, and there's all these things to decide, and that's a good thing. It isn't about just keeping your brain busy, but you have to give your emotional side a break every once in a while, or you'll wear yourself out. So it's good to stop and think, make the decisions of what you're going to do today, and continue to think about plans and things that you're going to do even as you navigate through grief. And the other thing, a couple other things I wanted to just touch on, because they've come up in comments.
Just before you do, Chris, please hold the thought, don't forget it. I just wanted to make a very quick comment about that post that you said. What I really, really loved about that post as well was that the author of that post actually really opened herself up to possibilities. And I love that she didn't go into this space of tell me what to do with it. She was like, tell me what you did so I can get ideas. And I really loved it, that everybody really respected it, and nobody went like, do this, do that. Everybody actually went like, take your time. And it was so beautiful. I love this post so very much, because that's what I want to see a lot more of in this group. For people to say, this is where I'm at, how did you deal with that? And then people come in and go like, this is how I dealt with it. And this is all solution-based and healing-based. And that's what I love. And that's what I want in this group, not the ones where then everybody went in with their story, how terrible and how horrible their loss is. That didn't happen in that post. Everybody actually went in to the solution and what they did. And I love that so much. I just want to highlight that for everybody who's watching that, because I actually made a comment in both those posts that had a lot about child loss in them, to say, we are live right now, come and join us, we are talking about this. And also just quickly, sorry, but Bonnie made a comment that she said, I take each day as it comes. And that is beautiful, Bonnie, to just allow yourself to allow some flow again. And I think you've done an amazing job with what you have been dealt with and how you handled Tanya's passing. You were really, really amazing in allowing yourself to taking the time, but allowing everything in, all the emotions, the joy, the hurt, the sadness, the fun. You allowed everything in, and that is what makes you so outstanding in the process. And Terry said, yes, I really agree, giving your emotional brain some time off. And Terry, you do that so extremely well with your mermaiding every single day. Terry is in the water with a mermaid club every single day. So again, this is whatever you can do in your unique situation to give yourself a break and allow yourself to have a break, allow some joy in, even if it's as simple as being in the water. And it's not always joy for Terry. There are like a lot of emotions coming up. It's a lot of processing coming up, and she's sending a lot of mermaid emoticons. So back to you, Chris. Before you lose your train of thought, I just wanted to highlight that because I really, really love that post.
So yeah, the other couple of things I wanted to touch on, and again, because they've sort of come up in posts one way or another, and the one thing that I see, not just in this group, but I see it a lot, posts when people are talking about griefs, is that this idea of grief and love being relative, that the amount of love you had for somebody has to be reflected in the amount of grief that you have after they go, and that one is all of the one thing built up being released in the other. And the way that I look at that is, if I stop for a minute and I back away from that statement, then and this is something that I would encourage folks to do, is to look at that statement, that if you love somebody this much, then you have to grieve and suffer, this much.
Then if you said that.
In essence, when you look at that, well, you might look at somebody like me who by comparison, I had a lot of people that tell me I seem to navigate through things very quickly. You know, with just in a matter of weeks, I was back to feeling great and doing okay. But would that be to say that I must not have loved my son very much? You know, that if my huge amount of love for him didn't translate into an equal amount of grief for a particular amount of time, then does it diminish the actual amount of love? And yes, there is a connection, but I guess the thing that I would encourage folks to do is think for a moment of the variety of definitions of what love is. We often know, if we're being honest with ourselves, that sometimes love is really attachment. You know, love is something other than what it is in its purest form. And when we love someone, or we love each other, or are loved in its absolute most purest form, then it's unconditional. It doesn't come with expectations, and it never brings about negativity. And so, you know, I love my son. I know he loves me, and it's in that I find that the grief isn't necessary or mandatory, because that love doesn't go away, and it doesn't have to change from love to grief. It's just there. You know, I have my own personal beliefs as to my oneness with my son, and how he and I are still and will always be together. Yes, I find peace in that. But, you know, again, when we think about that love translating into and having to be directly relative to a particular amount of grief, my advice is go back and look at your definition of love, and consider the possibility that love shouldn't have to bring too much sorrow, right? And I don't think either one of us are saying that somebody's going to lose a child and wake up the next day and, you know, be back to business as normal.
Of course not.
But if that happened, maybe that person's just has been prepared hearing these types of things, and already subscribing to the ideas and things that we're talking about, and maybe they could just
I need to cross my fingers. I will switch over to my other internet and really hope that I'm not losing you. If so, we have to both sign straight back in. But the internet connection is getting worse and worse, and I'm missing half of what you're saying. So cross my fingers. I'm switching over now.
I see you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep. I've switched over. So let's hope that this will give us better and more stable connection. I totally agree with you. And I'm so glad that you brought this up as a particular example, because this is a very, very common statement in the space of grief. You know, it just reflects the amount of love you had for that. And I'm sorry I'm saying that in such a theatrical voice, but it's really that theatrical, that's the word. Yeah, I was trying to get that right in my bilingual brain, how to actually pronounce that word. But it is really that concept of the more you love somebody, the more you suffer. The more you love somebody, the more sadness there is afterwards. And I don't believe in that, because Rob and I have such a strong connection. And I'm like you, the connection, the love, it doesn't change form. The physical presence is different. Yeah, absolutely. There is no more physical presence of my husband here, but obviously the love will always live on in our son. So that's, again, a very different example, because, you know, my kids are alive, but my husband's not. So again, this is not about comparison. This is about what your beliefs are around love. And I couldn't agree more that a lot of us get mixed up with this concept of attachment. And that is why in the free healing journey that we have in the group, one of the first, like actually the first exercise I ask people to do is to separate what we have lost from who we have lost, you know, because that is the attachment theory. What was I so attached to? The feeling of feeling safe, the feeling of feeling wanted, of feeling, you know, there's two of us together. That's whatever that is. Everybody's got different attachments and different things, skills, emotions that they miss after that loss. Yet it is important for us, and that is, I believe, coming back to your very initial question, why do I feel like that? You know, what can I make from that? And what do I want to decide for my life from here on in? What do I actually want in my life, if I only for one moment, I really invite every single person watching this to do that, no matter what your beliefs are. We are not here to tread on your toes. We are not here to insult you in the way that you grieve, in the way that you are experiencing your loss. We are here to offer different perspectives and different ways and solutions how you could potentially allow healing into your life. And when you allow yourself just for one moment, just for the exercise, to think about, how would I handle this? How would you handle this if you were in a different culture or surrounded by different society? If this expectation from society wasn't there to portray your love, you have to make this decision to never ever be happy again, or to never ever heal from this. This is a decision that I believe has been predominantly made by society's expectation. And not even going into that, where did it start? Why is it here? How is it serving us? Just for the very fact, just for the exercise of this very question, how could you make a decision to heal from this if society wouldn't expect from you to completely fall apart, if society wouldn't tell you that this is the worst thing that you could ever experience in your life? I would love to put this out there, and for you to allow yourself to really, just for this exercise, pretend that there is no expectation, that there is no label around this. How would you allow yourself to heal from this if there was no question around the if you should or shouldn't? I just needed to put this out there because I really feel that that is such an important thing to do. I just want to quickly go to, thank you for all the love. We're getting love hearts sent here. Bonnie said, my daughter is with me every day. I totally agree with you. This is also my belief, Bonnie. And Terry said, Bonnie Schwartz, Ryan is with me every day too, and he shows me something new always. And I believe in that. I really do. That, you know, everybody is different. As I said, you know, both Chris and I really respect that everybody's faith and beliefs and spirituality is different. Like when I went on a holiday out to the Central Coast, the first day we arrived there, I had this massive rainbow right in front of us into the lake. It was so close. I felt like I could touch it. The lake was like literally 100 meters from us, you know, not even, sorry, it was actually like 20 meters or something. It was so close. And I felt like I could just touch the rainbow. And when things like that happen, you know, feathers, whatever, there's so many beautiful signs that people always talk about. If you want to see them, you see them everywhere. If you're open to it, you see them everywhere. There's like so much proof for love and connection in this world. And I have dedicated my whole life to focus on just that. Everything else is out there anyway. People always say like, oh, you are too optimistic, or to this, to that. Are you ignoring that there is hunger and war and all of that out there? No, I'm not ignoring any of that. I know for a fact that it's there, but it's my choice what I focus on. And I have chosen to dedicate my life to love and connection. So this is why we're here. And I would really love to hear some comments from you guys. You know, what would you decide if you didn't have to suffer? Just as a theory.
It's important to, you know, if we're in that place of grief or in anything, as we navigate through things in life, if we can get outside of ourselves a bit and then go even further and get outside of our particular area, outside of our particular culture. You had Juan Pablo in, and he talked about the cultural differences.
I was just thinking that,
they navigate through death, right? And there's a community in Indonesia called Toraja, where they actually will keep the body of a deceased relative in the home for months, because their beliefs around that are entirely different. They actually believe that death is an extended sort of an illness. It's difficult for me to explain what I read about it, but they believe that this is kind of going on for a while, and they're also saving up to prepare for a celebration and a funeral. And some
Yeah.
of us would think that that is the most unusual thing in the world, to actually keep the body of our loved one in our home for weeks or months.
Yeah.
But to know that a whole group of people view it so absolutely different than
Yeah.
another group means that there's so many more possibilities. And it allows us to stop for a minute and say, okay, maybe I'm just following my particular group, and maybe there are other ways to process this. And,
Yeah.
and the other thing I wanted to touch on was I saw a post that said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, that grief is a spiritual obligation of sorts, that spiritual people just have to grieve or should grieve. And I have a background in studying religion, and I've studied various religions, and lots of different spiritual aspects, and I've never been able to find anything in any mainstream faith, especially with so many faiths that overlap in shared beliefs, that everything that I find tends to point us in a direction that when somebody dies, that it leads to something better. Even if it's reincarnation, because if it's reincarnation, they're making the choice to come back because they're looking at a bigger picture of multiple visits as they work towards some sort of higher level of enlightenment. And so no matter how I looked at this, I see nothing where that the individual who has passed on, if they go to a place of consciousness, I can't find anything that says that they would want us to be sad.
Yeah.
And when I look at it from that spiritual standpoint, yes, as a spiritual person, again, we're made up of many things, spirit and logic and feelings and that, and they do all connect together. It's impossible to separate just one out or just be one thing. We're all those things. But in finding that balance and looking at it from a place of being spiritual, then where is it if you believe that there's more than just this existence, more than just this life, then to work that back around again into that need to be sad and to grieve as part of that spirituality. Again, it's going to happen. I mean, we're going to experience it, but to ever feel like it's an obligation and that has to go on or last. I just personally have not been able to find that in my studies. Everything that I see points me to the fact that if my son is conscious as a conscious being, and he has time as he's enjoying the universe to actually think about me, and I would not be offended if he was too busy to think about me, but if he thinks about me, I would imagine that he would want me to continue to move on my journey. That if we're here for a purpose, he would want me to continue my purpose and not spend a whole lot of time being sad, and not just about him, but letting you get depressed about lots of different things in life. And I believe that those that have gone on now are free of the limits of the human condition. They're not limited by anything, and they wouldn't want us to be. They want us to move in that direction.
Absolutely. I also want to remind you guys of another interview that I did with Dr. Nicole Cruel, and she has got had a samurai grandmother, and they also have this cultural customs where they keep the body for a couple of weeks. And I just really, really love talking to her, and you'll find all the interviews that we just cross-referenced to with Juan Pablo and Nicole in the guide section here in the Loving Life After Loss group, and all the interviews are stored under, I think it's the third guide with the upscale grief interview, so you can always watch that back. One more thing that you said, Chris, really triggered something that I have shared once before as a comparison. We are the only I don't know if I want to say human race or the only culture, because it's more like a cultural thing, not like a human race thing, because as we just said, different cultures grieve very differently. But when I think of all that comparison with, the deeper you love, the more you need to suffer, and all of these statements that I really don't align with. For me, I always saw this comparison when you walk into a grief group. If you were to walk out on a battlefield and you see a whole lot of wounded people, and obviously here I'm talking about physical wounds, No one in the right mind would go out there and pour acid or salt into those wounds. No one in the right mind would go ripping those wounds, even bigger and pouring dirt into it. Everybody would go straight for the how can we dress this? How can we disinfect this? How can we heal this as quickly as possible? Yet for whatever weird cultural decision, grief is the only thing where we allow exactly that. How can we make this wound deeper? How can we make this last longer? How can we stop this from healing? And I am absolutely gobsmacked and completely puzzled as for the why are we doing this? Because when we look at the concept of healing, us as human beings, our physical body is absolutely mind-blowing. How we renew ourselves, how we heal. When you look into nature, when somebody whacks an axe into a beautiful tree, this tree will come up with its own healing ritual. There is a purpose, there is a concept, there is a what's the word I'm looking for? A process for everything that points towards quickest healing possible. And the only time where I see that completely counterproductive is when it comes to grief. And I do not understand why. I don't agree that it shows how big my love was for Rob if I was to be completely falling apart and suffering for another 10 years. I don't agree with any of it's the worst thing ever and you can't heal from that. I believe that healing is something that wants to occur, and it's just up to us to allow it and to find the right support. And I can promise you one thing here with Chris and I together, that you have come to the right group if you want that. If you are in that group of people who want the healing, you have certainly come to the right place, because that's all we offer here. And if you want to stay in the suffering, you might reconsider your decision, either to suffer or to join that group, because you will not be supported in your suffering in this group. And I'm saying that with a whole lot of respect for what has happened in your life. Yet it is your decision right now, whether you will allow that healing in or not. And we're here to help you with the healing part. So I really needed to say that.
You and I have both been through the grieving part, the suffering part. We certainly didn't skip over it, but no. Sitting where we're sitting now, right? And so we know and we respect that from the perspective of having gone through it. But now being in a place where we're healed, we're living a fulfilled life. Neither one of us want to help someone to feel settled and just staying in that point of grief. There are plenty of grief groups out there that I've seen that talk about just embrace it. It's just part of who you are now. Carry it, wear it like a sweater. I love those people, and but that's if I was going to participate in a group that was going to talk about just living with your grief and embracing your grief, I would have to be sneaking my comments in there to say, hey, but please consider the possibility that no matter how long it takes you, you can be taking steps, no matter how small they are, towards a healed life. So. And I was just, something popped up on my phone the other day. I want to share this because I've had people ask me before, have I felt my son, received any messages from my son? I'm really resolved in what I feel, that I know that if I didn't hear from him, from the other side, that I would assume he's busy, and that's okay. I'm not focused on that need for it. But I have to say this, it was probably 3 or 4 months after my son had passed. I was walking in a shopping mall, and he had called me once because he heard a song on the radio. And he said, hey, have you heard that song by Owl City called Fireflies? And I said, yeah. I said, it's the funniest thing. He goes, I said, every time I hear that, makes me think of you. I would think it's a song you would like. He goes, that's funny. It's the same thing. When I heard that song, I think of you. And so we made that our thing, that anytime we heard that song, we knew we were connecting across the distance. We were living almost at opposite ends of the country. And so I'm walking in this shopping mall and I look up at this store that he had bought clothes in before. And I don't know if you can see it, but there was this advertisement and I took a picture of it. And there's this model standing there. And although he's not my son's identical twin or doppelganger, it just stopped me in my tracks. And the moment that my brain thought that that looks like Ryan, that song started playing over the loudspeakers in the mall.
Look,
Immediately, within the very moment that I thought to myself. And so I took the picture and I've kept the picture, because if ever he reached out to me, you know, from the other side, I would have to say that would have been my sign. Is, you know, if it's coincidence, that's a very nice coincidence, and I'm thankful for it. So
I have to listen to that song now. I really want to listen to it. I had a very similar thing with Rob, and it was the song "I Want You to Have It All" by Jason Mraz, and just the line of it was just, and there's a whole long story to it. I'm not going to go into it now because I know we're like way over time already, but I so did not want to interrupt you here. I absolutely love talking to you today, Chris. I know that for both of us, this was a very confronting thought to talk about a topic that is so tender for so many people. And at the same time, we both knew that we have to do this. We have to talk about these things that are tender, that are really hard for us to address sometimes, because yes, it is a very deep loss. Nobody of us wants to negate that fact. But yes, we both believe that there is opportunity for healing, and this is exactly why we're here. And I'm so happy, Chris, that you are now also one of our moderators, that you are part of this group, part of my team here. And I feel very blessed that you came on live with me today to talk about something that is so confronting for many. And if any of you watching this, and I mean this with my absolutely open heart, full of love for all of you, if any of you is watching this and feels offended, feels not heard, feels that any of their story is negated or not seen, please do come forward and speak to us, because we're here to help you through this. We're here to help you heal. We're not here to offend you or hurt you, you know, and if you have taken offense, which I don't feel that anybody could have by what we shared, but if you have, please come forward and just talk to us about it, because it is our full intention to help you heal in this journey. So with that being said, soul contract, yes, Terry, there were so many beautiful comments. I don't even have the timing or to read them all, because we are now way past, but I just want to say thank you so much, Chris, for coming on live with me today and talking about something like that. That is really heavy for a lot of people. So yeah, any final words of wisdom that you want to share with us?
Just all my love to everybody in this group. You know, I'm here. You know, if you want to, you know, send me a message or speak to me specifically, you know, I'm here. I've been where you're standing, and you know, I've stood at the base of the mountain and I've made the climb to the top. And you know, what I can do is I can be your Sherpa. You know, every famous mountain climber, behind every famous mountain climber is some humble little Sherpa, you know, carrying the equipment and really telling that hiker, well, put your foot there or grab over there. That's what I can be. You know, that's what I can offer. You know, life is worth living. Your loved one that has moved on, I promise you, wants you to live the most fulfilling and complete life, a life full of love and experiences. You know, and though you may not, you know, move into that place tomorrow, again, just take a step over that starting line. There are plenty of us here waiting at that finish line for when you're ready to make it that far.
Deep gratitude and love to you. Massive hug to you, Chris. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for all your beautiful comments here. We'll definitely get back to all of you. And of course, Terry, Bonnie, Heather, the usual crew. Diane, thank you so much for your beautiful comments about your twin brother as well. And we make sure that we get back to Getting so much love. I love it. We'll get back to you. Thank you so much, Chris, and bye everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.